Hi, I'm Sheila Kuehl. Welcome back to Get Used to It. I say welcome back. You didn't miss the first hour. We're just actually starting out, but we've been around for 5 years, and we're happy to be back talking to you. Today, as usual, we have some incredibly intelligent people talking about an incredibly interesting subject for the gay and lesbian community. And this one has to do with the so-called gay press, or at least the treatment of gay and lesbian, bisexual, transgendered, and we don't know who's coming next, issues, questioning, that was it, questioning people in the press. We only know, I think as Will Rogers said, and I'm paraphrasing, what we read in the papers. And the question is, what papers are we reading, and therefore, what are we reading in those papers? Now that I've been incredibly confusing, let me introduce you to my wonderful guests today. First, Judy Weider, who is the editor-in-chief of The Advocate news magazine, 30-year-old publication devoted primarily to gay and lesbian issues and primarily for a gay and lesbian audience, maybe. Judy is the first woman ever to serve as editor-in-chief of that magazine, and that could be a whole show in itself. Hey, Judy. Welcome.
Yes,
welcome to Get Used to It.
Thank you.
Ernest Hardy, who is a freelance writer who writes primarily for Rolling Stone, for the LA Weekly, and for hip-hop magazines, and writes about race and sexuality and its impact on our larger culture, I guess, and vice versa. Welcome, Ernest. We're happy to have you here.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you. And finally, George Biagi, who is the associate publisher of the Gay and Lesbian Times, which is published in San Diego but serves Southern California. He was the former editor of that paper. I guess we consider that a local paper because it only goes to 1/12 of the population of the country, which is what Southern California has, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. Welcome, George. Happy to have you here.
Glad to be here.
Judy, we'll start with you. Some of the issues that I raised, somewhat jokingly, but not really, in my introduction. And I guess the first question, and you can answer it any way you want and go anywhere you want, is why would we have gay and lesbian press rather than just attempting to write about our issues and have them read about in the mainstream press?
Well, I think as far as The Advocate is concerned, at being 30 years old, this press existed before Stonewall. So you're talking about something where there was a time, believe it or not, with all the press we're getting right now, there was a time that was the only place you could write about gay and lesbian issues. So in this magazine, you're talking about something that has evolved and evolved and evolved to the point where we are now trying to compete with a world that has changed and something that people will not shut up about, let alone, you know, there was a time you simply couldn't talk about anything that was going on with gays and lesbians unless you did it in The Advocate. You know, then other gay and lesbian publications came along, and then of course right now it's everywhere you go. We have to figure out, well, what is for us? What should The Advocate be covering? What can we do that's going to be different and make this paper still so relevant to our readership, which is an ongoing, very difficult problem.
Well, but why is it important to our community to have this kind of a thing? I mean, it's a news magazine, right? And it's a national magazine.
Right.
How is it different from Time magazine?
Because we are only dealing with issues in the world that affect this readership. Even if we are going to look at something that's happening with President Clinton, we're going to look at something that is about the gay and lesbian issues, our spin on it, our view of it. If it's being covered in Time magazine, you're still being covered from the outside looking at us, rather than us looking at it from our own point of view, and bringing to it all the history that The Advocate would have as a news gathering organization for all these years.
So what is the difference? I mean, can you say that we have a point of view as opposed to...
Yes, I definitely think that we have a point of view.
Does it go beyond we're okay?
I think it certainly does, in the sense that where everything is really about the determination to have equal rights in this country, and so that whatever we're examining, we're looking at it, you know, with that kind of an overview and saying, well, is this fair? Don't we need to educate our own readers about what this could really mean to us, what the impact of this is going to be? That's the kind of thing. Time magazine, why are they going to bother doing that? You know, they're only having a small population of their readers who care, who are interested. Even the interview they did with Ellen DeGeneres, if you look at it, it's a one-page Q&A that does all come down to, yep, I'm gay. Whereas if we could have that interview that we have been going after for a very long time with her, it will be very, very different, because there are questions that gays and lesbians have about Ellen that nobody is asking.
Do I hear in something you just said that some of us are not all that anxious to be profiled in the gay press?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't want to necessarily say this is, an Ellen DeGeneres situation, but I think that we are amazed at the Advocate, the response that we get from people who are out, people whose work everybody knows about, and who are not necessarily, in the closet or worried about that. That's a whole other situation for the Advocate. But people who are out would be much happier profiled in some mainstream magazine or newspaper, but the Advocate, it's like, oh, that's very gay. You're really gay if you're in the Advocate. And that just comes with the history. You could talk about, internalized homophobia. You can talk about a lot of things when you have, when that situation comes up for us, because I'm constantly puzzled at the people that turn us down or the people that aren't available. And then we hear they'll do something else that suddenly they had time for when they didn't have time for this magazine.
Well, I guess it would seem you were saying something about the wholeness of your life being exclusively about being gay. I mean, I can only imagine, because it wouldn't bother me, to be written up as I have a number of times in the gay press.
Right.
But I guess the notion must be this magazine is only about gayness. And if I want to make a statement that I'm not only about gayness, as I guess some people do, that there might be some fright to it.
Well, I think that the assumption is that this makes you all and only gay. Whereas, again, I think that when you have a magazine that is hauling this family tree of history along with every interview, every contemporary thing that happens, sort of resonates with, with the saga of AIDS, the saga of Stonewall, which is a different situation from being a 5-year-old magazine or something more contemporary, something that was born in the 90s. There is that feeling that they are suddenly going to attach themselves to the whole landscape of having been gay or lesbian. And for some people, that's a big, thundering thing to take on. And I think that sometimes we hit resistance around that. I'm not necessarily saying that's how we present people in the magazine. It's just the feeling they bring to the magazine.
How do you make decisions about the balance that you might strike between sort of the positive stuff that our community really sort of needs to read about itself and feel good about itself, and the truth sometimes, or an incisive critique? I mean, you're a news magazine. How do you make those decisions?
Well, first of all, we are a news magazine, so the engine or the drive should always be the news. If something's happening in the news, I don't say, oh, that's just a little unpleasant, I'm not going to put that in the magazine. But I might go for a viewpoint or talk to a columnist or some of the other things that are in the magazine that can change color and add some kind of balance to what's going on in the rest of the magazine. Now, of course, you're putting this together within a 2-week cycle, so I have to figure it out as it's unfolding, because again, it's the news, which is so different from, I mean, I've worked in a lifestyle magazine, and it's a completely different puzzle. You are making more decisions. I'll do a little fashion, I'll do a little travel, I can lighten it up this way, I can look at drugs, I can look at, this scene and that scene, and put together something that's very well balanced. With a news magazine, things are coming up and you need to report it, investigate it, analyze it. That's the mission statement of the Advocate. So what I would do then, to answer your question, is I might go for a photo essay or a columnist or a commentary that would either come at it from a whole other point of view, do something very funny about it, try to get at a sort of on the other hand feeling about it. Also, what we choose to represent, for the photograph in it might help a little bit. But I try for balance. Sometimes you are, what's coming up is grim, and you need to go with that because ultimately it's the truth.
What about if the news is some major disagreement in our community?
Oh.
I mean, there's a critique of some of the gay press that it's, you know, that it essentially bashes our own, as though that was something that we should avoid.
Right. And certainly we have gotten a lot of angry responses for the fact that we do not sit there and stroke our leaders or our organizations, and we don't just go, yeah, you know, whatever, you know, just you're lovely and you're doing a grand job, and we wouldn't dare mention that you also screwed up the funding or you did this or you did that. We have often been accused of not being supportive enough, and since I've been editor-in-chief, I try very hard to also, because I walked into a situation in which every gay leader was like, oh, and now what are you going to do to us? You know, we've been eaten up and spit out by the Advocate for years, which I'm not necessarily saying is true, but I certainly think that our job is to be very incisive and honest and clear-eyed about what we're reporting, because I think you can get you can make up your own mind if people are giving you the facts. I certainly think that if somebody is attacking the HRC, I also want to hear from Elizabeth Birch. Mm-hmm. And if somebody is saying wonderful things about Elizabeth Birch, then I want to hear from, you know, somebody who has some doubts about what's going on, because I think that's what the reader should have. I think whether we like it or not, we should be informed.
How about you, Ernest? What do you see your role as being? I mean, this is, I don't know whether, we'll get into maybe whether you chose not to specifically work in the gay press, not that everybody in the world has to, but how do you see what you do in writing about, as you said, about race and sexuality in the larger context?
Well, that's a broad question.
Yes.
I'm constantly sort of reevaluating what my role is and what my own challenges are as a writer, what I bring to the table. And at this moment, I think there's a sort of common denominator of banality in covering issues that affect minority communities, whether it's of color, sexual orientations, what have you. And I feel, for instance, that there's been a sort of co-opting of a lot of language from the feminist movement, from the gay rights movement, from the civil rights movement, that the language is co-opted, but the ideas behind it and the reasons behind the movements are sort of either still ridiculed or ignored, but you'll have the language put forth. So you'll have something like right-wingers after President Clinton using language of feminism, saying, we're supporting women's rights. That's why we're doing this. And that's an example. And I feel that I sort of have a responsibility to bring the actual ideas to the table and explain why it's not just new language that's necessary, but the actual exploring of ideas behind the language.
So are you struggling with your editors as well as, with your communities? Or are your communities going, right on? And
well, it's both, actually. I mean, you'd be surprised. I mean, I think human beings have a natural desire to fit in and make as few waves as possible. So quite often, the very communities that you're writing to represent will be some of your most hostile, readers. And at the same time, a lot of editors will think that you're being self-serving or that you have some sort of, limited political agenda if you step up and say, well, actually, we need to expand this idea, or the interpretation that you're putting on it is not at all what I intended.
Well, if you talk about oppression and liberation, people are going to think you have a political agenda, but your community is not going to want to admit that they're oppressed and need to be liberated.
Right.
They're just trying to fit in. Is
right.
kind of what you mean?
Yeah. It boils down to
but
that
haven't we
often.
seen an explosion sort of in the mainstream press of at least some interest in us? I mean, first of all, they didn't, as Kate Clinton once said, they didn't spit up when they used the word gay and lesbian.
I mean, I think there's been an interest, but sort of going back to what Judy was saying before, when Time magazine covered Ellen DeGeneres, that article was very unfulfilling. I mean, I thought. Mm-hmm. A lot of the coverage I've seen recently in terms of why the show has seemingly failed, and the criticism has been very interesting to me. I mean, you'll read things where people say, "Oh, but this issue is tired. Why are we belaboring this point?" The writer will say, "I have lesbian friends, and they think the show is boring. It's not worth going into this." Blah blah blah. And again, I think it's one of those things where the language of progressive political thought is used to mask someone's own homophobia or their own discomfort with the subject, but they sort of present themselves as, come on, we're over this issue, let's move on. And that's not really what's going on.
So what do you think you're doing in your writing?
Hopefully,
Okay, what do you hope you're doing in your writing?
hopefully bringing, as I said before, bringing the actual issues to the table. I mean, there is a reason why Ellen's show is relevant. There is a reason why, I mean, I really hate to go back to hiding behind children, because I think in our culture right now, anyone who's making a political or cultural point always says it's for the children. But having said that,
It's for the children.
That's what I always say.
but having said that, I think it is for the children in a lot of ways, and not just the children who are 16 or 17, but also the children who are 40 years old and haven't really reconciled a lot of issues within themselves. And I know a lot of grown women who were just like terribly moved by Ellen's coming out episode and the subsequent episodes, and didn't feel that she was belaboring a point, you know, that the process of her getting a girlfriend, the process of her having discussions with her friends who are sometimes uncomfortable and other times sort of flippant. I mean, these are all great sources of comedy. And I think for the most part the show handled it fairly well. And I think a lot of the backlash that you saw in the mainstream media was people's discomfort with the subject matter to begin with. And it wasn't really a fair critique of the writing or the acting or the whole project, you know.
But in terms of the work that you do, say with the Weekly, I mean, because you write fairly often for the Weekly,
Right,
and as well as for Rolling Stone.
Right.
Do you feel that you are allowed to and encouraged to express sort of the fullness of who you are and how and what you want to say?
You know,
I'm not looking for only a yes or a no, but it's interesting to me.
It really varies. I mean, I personally feel that there's a huge, I don't want to say backlash, but you know, the idea of identity politics has really taken a real beating in the last few years, and I think homophobia and racism and misogyny in this culture are still very, very strong, and they are masked, and they're very insidious. And I think my responsibility as a writer writing about culture is to try and pull back the mask, and there is a lot of resistance now because everything is so incredibly bottom line driven, and editors don't want to, you know, offend publicists, don't want to offend advertisers, you know, don't want to upset celebrities or what have you, and it's a constant battle to get real ideas and to bring all that I think I have to offer as a black man, as a gay man, and the very distinct perspective I think that offers me on culture. Bringing that to the table is very difficult because most of the media, whether it's mainstream or so-called alternative at this point, really wants press releases. And it's not a matter of simply saying, you know, does the gay press simply, you know, is the gay press guilty of going rah, 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 gay is good? It's not that simple. I think across the board, there's a real dumbing down of political and cultural concerns.
And, well, some of that, I mean, I feel the same way because a million things will happen in a week in Sacramento, and I won't find them anywhere. Anywhere. I won't find them in specialty. I won't even find them in people's newsletters.
Right.
And it's partly because a lot of it goes on behind, and they're not exactly closed doors, but there's just not very many people who show up to listen, even though they're open doors. And so simply to get some kind of information out, much less something that wouldn't just be called a spin, but an analysis, which is sort of different from a spin. And we kind of look to the Fourth Estate to be interested and to, you know, to ask the questions. But it's interesting to me that what the Times has done, in not just in San Diego, because we get the Times, the Gay and Lesbian Times in LA and Orange County, etc., looks to me like it tries to include not just local news, but also international news and national news, etc. But tell me what you think the difference is, or why do you do a local gay paper as opposed to national or publishing in a sort of to a broader community?
I think there's probably three reasons why we tend to focus on local events and local happenings and the need for a local paper. One is to hearken to the children aspect, is what we do for the children. There are many people that are coming out of the closet, and people that live in an urban area lucky enough to have a local gay publication. That's sometimes their first entree into the community. I know that when I first moved to San Diego and was coming out, I would deliberately go into Hillcrest every Thursday and pick up every single gay publication I could get my hands on. And at the time, San Diego had 3. At times, we've even had 4. It's kind of a strange phenomenon, but we've always had multiple publications. And I would read it from cover to cover. It was the first opportunity I had to read about something gay happening in my neighborhood. And it's a free publication, so we go to many different distribution outlets, so someone can walk into a coffee house undercover, run over, pick up the paper, fold it, stick it in their pocket, and get home and learn about the community. And when they do that, the nice thing about local publications is we will print things that would never make it into the mainstream press, that would never get into the UT. And I'm talking about a bake sale for an AIDS agency, to sports scores from a softball league, to events of the Imperial Court, to things that are happening at clubs, to self-help groups that are happening at the center, things they would never get elsewhere. We get to do that on a weekly basis and give everyone kind of an outline of what's happening in their community that week. So it's invaluable, and I think it gives folks a sense of the community that they could be a part of, even if they haven't taken that first step into the community. Also, I think from the aspect of our advertisers, the people that support a free publication. In the gay community, we're extremely loyal. When someone supports our community, and we know that they're putting themselves out on the line, whether it's a gay-owned or a gay-friendly company, we'll feel comfortable going to their business. We know we can take our lover, our friends, our family to their business and not feel ostracized or feel like we can't hold hands when we go into the business. And it's been amazing over the years how mainstream the advertising base has become. Car dealers and restaurants that aren't even in the gay ghetto, so to speak, want to tap into not only the community's wealth, but the community's feeling of belonging and a sense of fact that there is a loyalty factor to folks that support the community. So I think for people coming out, it's important. I think for notification of those that are supportive of the community, it's certainly important.
But it's more than just a newsletter with, you know, we're having meetings at 6 o'clock.
Right, we do international news, national news, regional news, and then city news. So there's a lot out there. And I think that's another important point, is there's a vibrant, happening gay community all across the world that folks are interested in. And it's great stuff. And you can page through our publication any week and find out what's happening in Dubai and what's happening in Des Moines and what's happening, you know, on Delaware Street. You know, so it cuts across the entire spectrum of happenings. And it's not all happy news. I mean, sometimes it may be a series of gay bashings that happened in Thailand, and it may be an AIDS agency closing down in New York City, or it may be you know, a hate crime that happened in Hillcrest. We don't, you know, dress up only the good stuff. We kind of trot everything out there, and I think there's a responsibility, especially for the local press, to report the good and the bad. We have a motto at the Gay and Lesbian Times that we don't want to read about something happening in our community outside of our community. Nothing would make me more disturbed on a Thursday to pick up the Union Tribune and find out something happening with one of our local organizations that wasn't necessarily good, that we didn't even get a chance to review on our own or to give our own spin. And I think the spin is an important concept, that we think about our own community and we have views of our own community much differently than those that have not been exposed to the inner workings of the gay and lesbian community. So it's very important for us to be able to give our spin on an issue with our insights. And I totally agree with you with regard to what's happened with Ellen. I think it's a great show. I think it's a funny show. I think it's a very touching show. And I'm disturbed by people in the gay and lesbian community that tell me it's too gay or too lesbian. I'm thinking, how can a show be too gay or too lesbian? She's a lesbian. She's coming out. When I came out, my entire life was about being gay. Those first couple of months, I mean, I remember phone calls to my mom. She'd be like, do you always have to talk about everything being gay? But Mom, this is what's happening. And I think the show is right on the money. I think ABC's done a lousy job of promoting it. And I think the fact that they're using this ratings guise is their own fault. They haven't done anything to help the show out. And I know Ellen's frustrated, and I hope that another network's going to pick it up.
Well, it's interesting because we've also, if you all insist on talking about Ellen and her show, which of course when we rerun rerun this show in a year, everybody's going to go, well, it's all different now. But it's fine because that is not print, and yet it's made such an impact culturally that it almost sounds to me like it was the most important cultural event, nothing that happened in print. But what happened in print afterward was interesting because those critiques were not critiques that you saw on television.
Right.
Those critiques were critiques that you saw in print.
Absolutely.
Right? People were quoted as saying this. This is, and around coffee tables and, whatever. But I wonder, I love the style of the Gay and Lesbian Times, but it's also kind of snapshots of international and national news. It gives us a sense, I think, truly of community. But I don't know whether there's any attention paid to the question of analysis. Where I do see analysis, and I wonder if you think this is something not done by any of the other, more national press, is where something happens in San Diego or around in Southern California, get a long sort of news analysis of it.
Sure.
Because you've got your own homophobes down there.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, that's the venue of a local community paper where you can expound on something even through a series of 4 or 5 weeks and follow a story from start to finish and interview all the interested parties on both sides and do an analysis. We had an example. KGTV, the local ABC outlet, went undercover at a men's bathroom at San Diego State, and they took a camera into a stall based on information they got off the web for this webmaster who lists all the public sex places in the United States and the world that you can go to find quick anonymous sex. They actually took a camera into a stall, filmed people exposing themselves or having sex, and then ran it all over during sweeps weeks, which supposedly happened on a lot of ABC affiliates across the country. We were able to take a step back, interview the webmaster, interview the woman who did the story for KGTV, interview the head of the news department, talk to a psychotherapist about what's going on there, post anonymous interviews on the web to ask people that actually do participate in this kind of sexual encounter why they do it. And then also to print an expose on what the law is with regard to public sex. You'd never see that in the Union Tribune. You would just see the dirty part of it, the sensationalized, men are having sex in bathrooms again. Well, there's a lot more going on here. A lot of it has to do with the closet. A lot of it has to do with, easy access through the internet, which has changed a lot of the ways that we deal with news. But that's something that that we get to do carte blanche. We could devote 30 pages to that if we wanted to.
And then the Advocate, also was picking up this information, saw your paper, and we're in the process of taking, which is also a good way to discuss the difference of what we do, is taking, because they did an in-depth about what was happening, exactly what he just said, and we see it happening all over the place now, and the Advocate not only can take it to a national level, but see what the trend is and why now? Why now would that be okay? And we sat around last week and we said, why now? Well, when you have 2020 talking about some woman accusing the president of groping his genitals and this, it's like, hey, the doors are open. People want more. So suddenly, gay is always a hot thing to go for, and we'll really get down and dirty on this. And I think that that's a great example of showing both why we need the gay press, because we have our own spin, our own angle, and our own way of looking at it, and also how the local press helps the national press look at something that's happening and saying, my God, this isn't isolated. This is happening all over the place. What does it mean?
Well, it's interesting, though. They think we're all about sex anyway. And I guess in a way, it's not a wrong critique or analysis, because, frankly, at bottom, the only thing that distinguishes us is who we're having sex with. Or if we want to expand it, it's sort of affectional preference or whatever.
But I think all people are dealing, gay, straight, whatever, are dealing with sex as something that's a big old deal to them. And so that, yes, here we are with this one little quirk that doesn't, that they can grab onto. And what should it be? It should be sex. What would they care if it was who we ate dinner with or who we went to the movie? That's nice. Nobody cares. They care about sex, no matter what you're talking about in the press. I mean, that's what sells papers, literally.
But go ahead, Ernest.
I was also going to say that I think Judy was saying at one point they were sitting on the table and asking why. But I think when you have, Elton John being knighted and Ellen on the cover of magazines and, all these different characters on sitcoms coming out and blah, 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 I think, again, that goes to part of the backlash that you have to be reminded, the public has to be reminded of how horrible this all really is. If all these normal faces, if the pop star you've loved for 20 years is gay and he and his lover are showing up at movie premieres, if Rupert Everett steals a movie from Julia Roberts and middle America is saying he's the man that we love, then not that it's any
Let's
sort of...
quickly remind them of how horrible they really are.
They need to reconcile something with what they've been taught for years and years and years about how bad we are.
So I think there's always like this sort of checks and balances mechanism in the media that's perverse and negative, but it exists. A step forward, two step back, that sort of thing.
Well, it also gives us a chance to say something about what they're doing, which I think is what you were...
And that's what's been missing. I think, we try to explain to KGTV, you didn't take it to the logical conclusion of talking to the people that were actually doing the acts. Why are they there? Why, if you're a married man and your wife is waiting for you to come home and your kids are there, why are you stopping off at a university and having sex in a bathroom? But they don't want to hear the answer, because then they might have to confront some other issues.
It implicates them.
Right.
Exactly. Well, we had, in terms of media and press, when the Cunanan thing exploded this year, and this is maybe another good example of what do we do and why should we do anything. If the press was all over it, the mainstream press, we had the advocates sat there and said, wait a minute, they're on the cover of Time with Cunanan, they're on the cover of Newsweek with Cunanan or Versace, one or the other, but that was the story. Even New York Magazine was doing Trophy Boys. What should we do? And we can't ignore it. What's for us that's going to be different? And we wound up doing probably one of our most important cover stories this year on how the press was handling this murder, and the fact that he was being called a gay killer, that Tom Brokaw was going on television calling him a homosexual. I mean, like, oh, that's wonderful. I mean, what about a disturbed man who happened to be gay? The way that it was handled was so revealing about where this country is at about gays and lesbians, and that did happen right on the heels of Ellen. Right on all this wonderful, glorious, isn't it wonderful, proud, came this, oh, but excuse me, just what you're saying. Let us point to the nightmare of what they're really like. And it was Cunanan City. And we did the one thing as a gay press that the straight press could not do, which was to look at the press and how they responded to this man and to this murder and to this tragedy.
There is a difference, though, sometimes. Ernest was right. We want to explore what it's like being the first woman to be editrix-in-chief of the, of the Advocate. Because it looks to me like a lot of the gay publications really are about sex. Or at least the way in which things are approached in terms of who the audience is. I mean, okay, I look at the ads and I think, well, this is not the lesbian news, so I'm not going to look at all these ads, but... And I may look at the ads in the lesbian news, but it's sort of the same thing. Now, in the straight culture, it's also the same. You use a lot of sex and sexuality to sell stuff. But I know that there have been some struggles for you at the Advocate. How is it being the first woman editor there? And
well, I think it's undiscussable, actually. but I think that for me, I have to deal with the fact that I have a publication that is, at best, in this ratio, 70% men, 30% women, and that readership for the women has not really grown. With me at the helm, no matter what we do, it doesn't seem to really grow. I think that, to be really, really honest with you, that I have a certain amount of feelings that are just puzzled about what gay women want. What do they want? And I recently, you were there, I gave a speech at the Los Angeles Gay and Lesbian Center when the Advocate was honored, in which I sort of held up this cover story that we did this year on lesbians and breast cancer. And we were very proud of it. You can only imagine, nobody would do such a thing. We did it. And what I found happen really is like a walking illustration of where the gay men and gay women are at. It was basically that the men looked at the big breast and what is that? It doesn't look like a penis. It's not them. It's not them. Their narcissism wasn't being, they couldn't look in a mirror and see themselves, so they sort of walked by the cover. And the women complained. You know, it was too perky, it wasn't politically correct, it's so negative, you know, I mean, they don't want to read about breast cancer. It was, and we had some really important things in that story that we had done a lot of investigating, you know, and came up with a couple of things that were specifically for lesbians, and the, you know, the saga of what you do about breast cancer and why lesbians were getting it. We did a lot of research. I don't know who read it. I really don't know. It was very frustrating for us. Again, this is not like a cause. The Advocate is not a cause, it's a business, and we have to respond in some way to the marketplace. I really believe that the marketplace tells us a lot about ourselves. I think that men in general, I mean, I'm very pleased that you were talking about Ellen, because I have been surrounded very often by gay men who are like, I'm bored, I don't care, this isn't about me, and you know, and really don't like the show. So this was very encouraging for me. But you know, by and large, I think that men are just much more supportive. When I was the editor of Genre magazine, which is, I guess, another show, I was amazed. Men would do photography for free, they would write for free, they was, you know, it's like support, throw their money at things, they're big tippers, they, you know, there's just more that looks like them, and they'll support that. And the women really sit back and say, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Is it possible to write for men and women in our community? I mean, it seems like such an uneasy alliance to me.
It is.
Anyway, I give us a lot of credit for trying.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, we're
Well, we
sort of
have to.
dear. We at least use the word racism. We're a little worried about it. We're going to try to do something about it. And we worry about sexism. And we're going to try to work together, because we're a community that
Common
essentially
goals.
could bridge just about every gap.
Right.
Because we have nothing in common except the sexuality, and so we come from everywhere. But is it possible, I mean, in
Well,
your
I
own writing,
think-
Ernest?
I think any minority community, it's going to be an ongoing struggle to define what is meant by community, and it's always going to shift and change. And it's not. It would be so easy if you could say this is a community and these are the issues that affect it, and this is how we're going to cover it and present it, etc. But the bottom line is, you know, when you have people from different classes, when you have people from different educational backgrounds, when you have people of different races, it's always going to be a push and pull. When you have, you know, the gay community, I mean, I don't know if there is going to ever be an easy answer to that question. And in all honesty, I think there probably shouldn't be, because the struggle will spur growth, I think, both in individuals and in the community. And it keeps you on your toes, and it is a challenge, and it can be awfully frustrating, especially when you know that you're doing your best, and when you really are trying to reach out to a variety of members of a community.
Well, gender has always been a huge divider in a lot of communities, and it's a question, I don't know in our community whether gay men have a better sense of who they are and what they care about than lesbians do. Because I remember there was a huge gathering of lesbians where we were going to try to figure out, now what is the lesbian agenda? And at that time it was very difficult to separate issues from the larger feminist agenda, because so many of those issues were about us, and then there was a different spin, as there are for women of color. The question of, you know, can you work was not the issue for women of color. It was how to work equally, because all women of color were working and had to. And the same thing, I think, with lesbians. We had health concerns and, you know, concerns about children. But I don't know of a publication that that we feel very well served by. The Lesbian News fills that niche and tries to, but there's still a lot of critique, you know, of that. How does
It's frustrating for me, because we go round and round with this at our editorial meetings, is how can we better serve the women's community? And you know, we've added a couple of columnists. We've added a social columnist. We just picked up the Lesbian Notions column, which is really well written. And nothing will break your heart more than when you've done a couple of cover stories and some features and some arts reviews on women, and then a woman will call in and say, you know, you really don't have anything in that paper for me. I don't think you're... And what I'll do is I'll pick out the paper and say, let's go through this together. And 90% of the stories in a gay and lesbian publication that are newsworthy are general interest stories. If there's an AIDS foundation that opens, or if there's a hate crime or a pride festival, they're usually, they cover both genders. And then you can sit down and count the number of stories that you have, and I'm sure you probably do the same in yours. And sometimes it's about 60-40. It's certainly better than what the readership is. You know, our readership is about 75-25. And I can tell you, to a person or to a story, we have more than 25% general interest, lesbian-based stories in our publication. But the perception is reality. And if someone doesn't think that we're doing a good enough job, we need to keep trying to, you know, to get them better represented. But I'm a little bit encouraged by the younger, I think it's more generational. I think maybe during the 70s, when the feminist movement was kicking in and the lesbians were identifying this agenda, the men were busy, you know, getting high and you know, and having sex and you know, during the 70s, the hedonistic 70s.
Keep dancing.
Right, but now I think these younger kids that are coming out in high school that have these support groups, I notice at the Euphoria Coffee House, it's guys and gals together. They're doing things together. The softball league, the newer teams that are forming are co-ed. And I'm thinking maybe they're finally getting it. These younger kids that are feeling more comfortable coming out in high school because they've got you know, organizations that are gay and straight organizations together.
Right.
They learn to work together earlier.
Well, and they're
than being separate.
criticizing us for this duality stuff,
Right.
you know, because bisexuality is too limiting for them. They want to, you know, identify that this question of sexuality is much more complicated.
Right.
And I think that the latest movements that I've seen are makes me feel very hopeful about it, which leads me into sort of what may be the final question, because I think we may have something to say about it. What about the future? What are the trends? You said, as a national magazine, we have a chance to look around and see some trends. We saw the, as they referred to it, the other Timothy McVeigh story, in which it implicated questions about the internet. And of course, this was simply identifying somebody, I think, on AOL, and you know, doing that kind of research to out him in the military and get him out, and that sort of backfired. But trends that you see sort of coming in our community or in the larger world about our community?
Well, you know, I think that a lot of the things we've been talking about, the visibility is a struggle for people, and I think that many things like the internet and, you know, equal rights, or being able to be in the military, or being able to get married, whether you want to or not, personally, these are things that are absolutely essential, because what they lead to is visibility. If you're in the Army and you know, you're in there with somebody who's a homosexual, you're going to have to deal for the first time maybe with, oh, that's what this is all about. And I feel that if, you know, if we keep on pushing on these fronts, that is going to be the most important thing that continues to happen, which is that people feel safe enough in places to be able to come out, and that is what changes everything. I think the younger people, as you're saying, you know, there may be many reasons why they're looking at, you know, of course, all the old battles is a lot of baggage, and they really just want to cut right through it. The internet helps them, whether you think of the internet as a grand closet or a great open space. I mean, there's different points of view about that. I think that the amount of experiences that people are having, reading about, seeing, that keep this on the table and visible is clearly the trend. Sometimes it's horrifying because of the nature or the spin that's going with it. But still, it's out there, and I kind of believe that all the struggles, like Ernest is saying, is fine as long as we just keep doing it. You know, more and more and more stuff will break loose.
There's so many things. One of the things that I find especially heartening is young people of color who are coming out, who at one point felt that they had to sort of cut ties with their racial group if they were going to be gay or lesbian, are really very early on having this sort of synthesis of race and sexuality without near the drama or trauma that a lot of my friends and I seem to have gone through. And they're finding support and validation in places that you wouldn't expect. I mean, I see always, like, you know, these groups where I live in Hollywood, these like groups of young gay cholos. You know, you see, I mean, there's tons of hip-hop clubs springing up across the country now that are catering to an urban, you know, Black and Latino clientele. And these are gay hip-hop clubs. And so I think without necessarily putting it into vocabulary, without necessarily having theories about it, identity fuck is really going on with a lot of young people, and it's just a natural thing for them. And I think that's a really good thing. And I hope that the corporate machinery, which is always so desperate for a new thing and a new trend and, you know, gobbling up whatever is next, they're going to turn to that at some point. I just hope that, again, the ideas and the true relevance of it isn't pulled away from the surface. That's another show. I mean, you know, the whole notion of like a gay sensibility has already been so co-opted by the mainstream, yet there's still so much homophobia. So if that machinery can actually pull both substance and style from some of these new occurrences.
It may or may not be another show, because I'm really struck by the fact that, especially now, most of what we know, we hear from people we don't know, or we read something they've written that we don't know. We see it on television. We get it on the internet. We have opinions about it that we get maybe from our friends, or in email, or we may talk in email, or even in chat rooms now. But most of what we know, the epistemology of it, is really from people we don't know, you know, from our publications, from fiction, or from the fiction news that we kind of see on television. And I think that if these ideas get co-opted in a way, it will be because they're starting to have resonance kind of among communities and starting to come back through popular culture. It's so interesting how something will catch fire and be an idea. What do you see as these sort of trends?
The trends for me, I think, are limitless in the sense that if I look back to where we were just 7 or 8 years ago, the whole concept of gay and lesbian marriage was not even, I don't even think it was on the, you know, it wasn't on the scale. Nobody was even looking at it. And here we are. It's, you know, it might possibly become reality in Hawaii, maybe Alaska. It's happening in other countries. The issues have come along so quickly that I feel that sort of maybe with the civil rights movement or other struggles, once the cat's out of the bag, it's kind of tough to stuff it back in. And I feel that the more people are feeling the ability to come out at earlier ages, or even at later ages, when you think that they have nothing to gain by coming out other than their own self-awareness, you can't stop it. And I think that as we come out, which is still the most political, I think, event that any single person can do, the most political action, it brings 10, 15, 20 people with them that may not even have a prior connection to the community. They now can put a face to this movement. It's very difficult to unlike someone that you already like because of something that they've shared with you. And many times I've found people are closer to you once you confide something so important and you say, you know, I have something to tell you, you know, I'm a gay man. And like, the response has been, well, thank you so much for feeling that you could trust me with that, or you could tell me that, or bringing me into your family of gay friends, or, you know, extended family. And that is, I don't think you can put a price tag on that. It's just amazing that.
But there is a price tag on some of this stuff, and some of it goes to the cost of publishing these things as well. I mean, I guess one of my questions goes to any conflict that you might feel, and I'm not certain how this would play out in your work, Ernest. You depend a lot on advertisement, a lot. And you were talking about the kinds of ads that you have that are really community ads. In The Advocate, it's a little bit different. And you know, I've been pretty critical about the fact that our community relies so much on booze ads and booze sponsors, which seems to me that they see an opportunity when they want one, and they'll grab it. Do you have any conflict? I remember when Ms. Magazine decided they weren't going to take any more ads because everything conflicted with what they wanted to say. Who might want
Which is where that reputation comes from.
Does The Advocate have a problem in that kind of conflict?
Well, you know, we get our letters, and we get, you know, letters about, you know, smoking or alcohol or something like that. It's a trade-off. Again, you know, it's you know, the other thing that the reader would want that comes along with being able to get a national advertiser is, you know, nice glossy pages and, you know, be able to, for the magazine to afford some really interesting news photos or, you know, better writers. Or it's a trade-off. You know, without that, I think there would be a tremendous loss in getting people to be interested in reading some pretty difficult news stories sometimes. So, I mean, and that's definitely the way that I look at it. I understand that, you know, when you have a national advertiser coming into a magazine like The Advocate, which is not, again, a lifestyle magazine, so you're not getting fashion ads, you're not getting that kind of fun stuff. That's pretty adventuresome for them, for Coors or whatever, to come into The Advocate, because they're coming into a magazine that is saying, this world really can hurt people. It's prejudice, it's homophobic. You know, that's the news that's coming out in this magazine, and it's not being done necessarily in a very pretty, fun, you know, gosh, aren't we happy-go-lucky people way. And yet these national advertisers that, you know, the representatives are not necessarily gay, are saying, let's go in there and see if we can make some money off of this population. Let's go in there and see if it doesn't hurt our company. I feel like it's another forefront. I certainly understand that, you know, gays and lesbians have liquor problems, gays and lesbians have smoking problems. What are we, you know, catering to that? Are we making it worse? Again, it's, there's a trade-off for it, and I think national magazines go through this all the time. I mean, it's no different for this population, and I think there's something to be gained. It would be great if all the ads were about wonderful things that had no effect on our health, but that's not the way the world works, and it doesn't work any differently in this magazine.
I think one of the tensions in this whole argument as well is a lot of people view it as a triumph when they are seen as a demographic. You know, that is their mark that we've arrived. We are a desirable demographic, and then there's a whole other, you know, school of thought that says I don't really want my terms of humanity or whatever determined by the marketplace, or I don't want the revolution, you know, waged on Wall Street, what have you. And I think, I mean, that to me is really one of the most interesting aspects of watching the ways that different gay and lesbian magazines present themselves. I mean, there are some that I personally just will not read because, I mean, it's offensive to me. I mean, there's too much gloss. And it's just like so clearly, this is a demographic that we will deliver to corporate America, and that's offensive to me. And I really appreciate and respect those publications that are at least, you know, struggling and juggling the issues and being realistic about, okay, we are a business, but at the same time, you know, let's have some real meat in these pages as well.
Looks like in the local papers, looks
We'd
like
be
party, party, party.
Well, we'd be dead without the advertising. We're a free publication, but what we try to do is have standards, you know, and you'll see it in, I mean, there's some LA publications that have a lot lower standards than we've got. There are certain parts of the male anatomy we will not show, certain parts of the female anatomy we will not show in an advertisement, and that includes the sex ads in the back of the publication. We just have certain hard and fast rules that we will not, that we won't bend. But we've tried to go out beyond you know, receiving ads from alcohol sponsors and Camel cigarettes or whatever to try and get the car dealers, and we've been fairly successful. But I mean, there are even some mainstream advertisers we won't accept. We're on the other side of the Coors argument. We won't accept you know, money from Coors, basically because we don't feel that things have changed enough with the way the corporate and the family funds are, you know, still coming.
Well, see, if you took a politician's point of view, you would take the money from Coors and write a story about how the family is putting money into homophobic organizations that are, you know, killing legislation, for instance.
Funny you should say that.
Yeah? Why?
Stand by.
Well, but it sounds like it might be difficult. I'm not saying...
It is difficult.
You know, I
of
haven't seen The
course.
Advocate really pandering to its advertisements. That's not what I'm saying at all.
Right. Well, sometimes they'll have, I'm thinking of an ad that we had gotten a while ago that we ran once, and it was a cigarette ad, and it was, you know, I just kept puzzling at it when it first came in, and it was almost like a heterosexual joke about two women, and I kept looking at it and thinking, oh, this isn't you know, and I think all the readers did that too.
What's the connection, right?
It's like, I think, oh, this is great. No, I think I'm insulted. I'm not. I don't. This, you know, and I don't even smoke.
Was that
You
your
know.
pool table? Was that the one? Was it-
No, but so I did go to the associate publisher and said, ooh, I think I'm going to take a lot of heat for this. And he went to the company, the cigarette company, and they put together a different ad for us the next time. But it's still a cigarette, you know, it's a cigarette, but...
Well, but that's different. I didn't mean to raise it like you have to turn out all ads that might jeopardize
You know, I
our
think
health.
Ms. was hurt. It's difficult enough to write about something where people are oppressed and people are hurt and people are, you know, you're talking about negative kinds of things and not fun things. If that's Mrs. mission statement and they have an important thing to be doing, then to also have had to go down to paper that looks sad and no pictures that look, you know, again, this is personal opinion of my own, I sort of thought, you know, that's a little too much for me.
But the great thing about that is, you know, with them having made that decision and taken action based on that decision, down the road other people can learn from that and say, you know, I actually have deep respect for that decision and applaud, you know, you having the integrity to stand behind your beliefs. But the real world is a little more complicated.
Yeah, but now
than
we
that.
see Red Book doing the kinds of stories that Ms. was doing in its first year. I mean, it's just become
But
much
Red Book
more
has a
sort
whole
of
other identity. So for them to
That's
reach
right.
outside of themselves and do something
That's right.
difficult is just like, ooh, aren't they getting more interesting?
Well, I hate
But
to
I
say
agree with
this,
what
but I
you
think
said.
we've not only finished our hour, but I think we're even running into the next, you know, 65 minutes. So I want to thank you all very much for being here. This has been fascinating. Thank you for your work. Thank you for being there with us. I want to encourage you to support your national and local gay and lesbian publications. Pick them up if they're free, buy them if they're not. Talk back. And certainly in terms of the so-called mainstream press, you tell them that you want more stories about yourself and they better get used to it.
There.